The man drove back into his driveway after a long weekend in the woods, his truck bed carrying his gear, his boots muddy, and the smell of fresh pine still clinging to his jacket. For him, hunting was not just sport. It was peace. It was the place where his mind cleared and the noise of the world disappeared. He had spent 3 days away from the neighborhood, walking the quiet woods near his property, setting up campfires, cooking his meals on the flames, listening to the calls of birds and the rustle of deer in the brush, and when he came home he felt strong and calm. But that calm ended the moment he opened his mailbox. His hand froze as he pulled out an envelope with the HOA stamp. His stomach dropped, his chest tightened, because every time the HOA sent something it was never good. He tore it open standing there on the street, his eyes running across the bold words, notice of violation and fine. His heart pounded. The letter said he had been fined for disturbing the community and breaking HOA hunting rules. The number was big, larger than most people's monthly bills. His jaw tightened, his hands trembled with fury, because he knew there were no such rules in the handbook. He had read it cover to cover before buying his property. There were fines for trash cans left out too long, for grass too high, for paint colors not approved, but never had there been a rule against hunting on land outside HOA control. This fine was made up, a weapon created out of nothing, and he knew exactly who was behind it: Karen, the HOA president, the woman who had made his life miserable from the first day he moved in. She always wore her smug smile like armor, always acted as if the neighborhood was her kingdom, always bent the rules to her will. She had fined him for leaving muddy tire marks after rain. She had fined him for having firewood stacked too high. And now she had fined him for hunting on his own weekend. His fists tightened as he crushed the paper in his hand. His calm weekend gone, his anger rising like fire in his veins, he stormed toward the HOA office down the street, his boots striking the pavement hard, his shoulders squared. Neighbors peeked through blinds as he passed, whispers already starting. They saw the letter in his hand. They saw the storm on his face, and they knew a fight was coming. He pushed open the door of the small office where Karen sat behind the desk, her perfectly styled hair and polished nails shining under the fluorescent lights. She looked up and smiled, the kind of smile that wasn't warm but sharp, the kind that meant she was enjoying herself. "Ah," she said sweetly, "I was expecting you, back from your little hunting trip, I see. I trust you enjoyed yourself." His voice was tight, controlled, but full of fire. "What is this fine? What rules did I supposedly break?" Karen leaned back in her chair, lacing her fingers together as if she were a queen listening to a peasant's complaint. "You disturbed the community," she said calmly. "Your hunting frightens people. It sets a bad example, and as HOA president I must protect the peace of the neighborhood." He slammed the letter on her desk, his voice rising. "There is nothing in the handbook about this. Nothing. You can't just invent rules to punish me." Karen smirked, her eyes glinting with arrogance. "I can, and I did. If you want to hunt, pay up, or perhaps consider living somewhere else. We like quiet residents here, not men running through the woods with guns like savages." His chest burned with rage, his teeth clenched so hard his jaw ached. He took a step closer, his voice low. "You don't own me, and you don't own the woods. You can't stop me from hunting." Karen laughed, a cold, cruel sound. "Oh, but I can. Every time you break my rules I will fine you, and eventually you'll realize you don't belong here. This neighborhood is mine, not yours." The words cut deep, her arrogance choking the air. Behind him he heard a shuffle. He turned slightly, and saw 2 neighbors standing at the doorway, whispering to each other, their eyes wide. They had come to pay fees but now stood frozen, watching the storm unfold. One whispered, "She's pushing him too far." The other replied, "She'll ruin him like she ruins everyone." The man straightened his shoulders, his voice sharp enough to cut through the tension. "You've gone too far this time, Karen. You think you can scare everyone into silence, but not me. You can fine me. You can threaten me. But one day it will come back to you." Karen tilted her head, her smile never fading. "We'll see, won't we?" she said softly, her words dripping with mockery. He grabbed the letter off the desk, crumpled it tighter, and stormed out, his boots slamming against the floor. Outside the whispers grew louder. More neighbors peeked through windows, some shaking their heads, some secretly smiling, because deep down they all hated her but feared her too much to fight. He walked back to his house, every step heavy with anger but also with a strange new strength. His mind burned with questions. How many more fines would she invent? How many more lies would she spin? And how long would the neighborhood let her reign unchecked? He clenched his fists tighter, whispering under his breath, "She thinks a fine will stop me, but she has no idea what's coming." Suspense hung heavy in the air as the man looked out over the woods beyond his house, the place that gave him peace. And in that moment a fire began to grow inside him, the kind of fire that doesn't die until justice is served. The next HOA meeting was crowded, the air thick with unease as neighbors filled the chairs lined in rows. The man sat near the back, his face calm but his fists tight. He knew Karen would try to use the stage to humiliate him. He had seen it before. She thrived on making others look small so she could look powerful. She stood at the front of the room in her spotless suit, her hair pulled tight, her clipboard in her hand like it was a weapon, her lips curled into that same smug smile that made people shiver. She tapped the microphone and cleared her throat. "Order, order everyone," she said, her voice sharp. "We have important matters to discuss, and I intend to keep this meeting under control, unlike some people who think rules do not apply to them." Her eyes flicked toward the man in the back. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, whispers moved like waves. Some neighbors looked down at their shoes, others peeked at him nervously, waiting for the explosion. Karen flipped a paper dramatically, raising it high so everyone could see. "First matter, this violation notice," she announced. "One of our residents has been fined for disturbing the peace with his hunting trips, and I want to make it clear to everyone that this behavior will not be tolerated. We are a civilized community, not a wilderness." A weak chuckle rose from the front rows where her loyal supporters sat, but most of the room stayed silent. The man's jaw clenched, his chest rising and falling heavily as she went on. "Imagine children hearing gunshots. Imagine families being frightened by such dangerous hobbies. What kind of neighbor behaves like this? He should be ashamed." Gasps rose, not of shock but of discomfort. People looked between her and the man, but nobody dared to speak. Karen thrived on that silence. She mistook fear for respect. She smirked wider and said, "And when he came crying to my office, demanding that I take back the fine, I told him the truth. If he wants to hunt, he can pay up, or leave, simple as that. This neighborhood does not need people who think they're above the rules." She placed her hand dramatically on her chest as though she was a hero, her voice full of arrogance. "I stand for the safety of our community. I stand for the children, and I will not let selfish behavior threaten our peace." The crowd stirred nervously. Some nodded weakly out of fear, others whispered behind their hands. But no one clapped, no one cheered loudly, only Karen's chosen allies smiled at her. The man could feel the heat rising in his chest, every word stabbing like a knife. But he stayed still, his eyes locked on her, his silence stronger than shouting. She mistook his silence for defeat and pressed harder, her voice dripping with poison. Maybe he should find another place to live, somewhere far away where people don't mind reckless hunters disturbing their mornings. Because here, we have standards, and if you cannot follow them, you do not belong here. The room grew colder. The man finally stood, slowly, his chair scraping across the floor. All eyes turned toward him. The whispers stopped. Silence spread like smoke. Karen tilted her head, still smiling but with a flicker of unease in her eyes. The man's voice was calm, steady, but heavy like thunder before a storm. "You twist rules to suit yourself. You invent lies to control people. You stand here pretending to protect this neighborhood, but everyone knows what you really protect is your power." The room froze. People's eyes widened. Karen's smile faltered for just a moment before she forced it back. "Sit down," she snapped. "This is not your turn to speak." But the man didn't sit. His eyes stayed locked on hers, his words cutting through the air. "You can fine me. You can humiliate me, but I won't bow to you. Not now, not ever. And one day everyone in this room will see you for what you are." Karen's face turned red, her hands gripping her clipboard tight. Her voice rose into a screech. "Enough, you will respect me. I am the president of this HOA, and I decide what is right." But her voice cracked, her control slipping as she realized the silence in the room was no longer respect. It was fear mixed with doubt. People were seeing the cracks. The man turned slowly and walked out, his boots heavy on the floor, leaving Karen trembling at the front, her smile gone, her eyes burning with hate. Suspense filled the air, neighbors whispering again, some now daring to wonder if he was right. The battle lines had been drawn, and though Karen stood tall in her arrogance, the man had planted a seed of doubt that would soon grow into something she could never stop. The man left the HOA hall with Karen's mocking words still burning in his ears, her arrogant laugh echoing like poison. But as he walked home his anger began to sharpen into something colder, not blind rage but focused determination. He knew Karen was lying. He knew she was twisting the rules. But this time he wanted more than to fight her fine. He wanted to destroy the foundation she stood on, to tear down the false throne she had built for herself. He spent the night sitting at his desk, the HOA handbook open in front of him, his laptop glowing in the dim light. Page after page he read, line after line, and nowhere did it say anything about hunting. Nowhere did it give the HOA any right to punish him for what he did outside their small reach. Yet Karen had spoken with such confidence, such arrogance, that the neighbors almost believed her, and that gave him an idea. She wasn't just inventing rules. She was feeding them lies they couldn't disprove, because nobody bothered to check, but he would check. He would dig deeper than anyone had before, and so he started with the HOA's financial records, public documents that most people ignored, but he had the patience. He sifted through meeting notes, budgets, and property maps, and slowly something strange appeared. There were repeated payments marked as trail maintenance, thousands of dollars flowing through the HOA each year. But when he compared them with the county maps, he saw that those trails were not HOA property at all, they were leased. The real ownership was with an old company that had been trying to sell the land for years. His eyes narrowed, his heart thumping harder. Karen had built her reputation on those hiking trails. She bragged about them in every meeting, claimed she personally protected them for the community, even charged small donations for trail passes. But the truth was simple. They were never hers, they were borrowed, and soon that lease would expire. He leaned back in his chair, his mind racing with possibilities. If the land went up for sale, anyone could buy it, even him. The thought made his chest tighten. He pictured Karen's smug smile vanishing when she realized her power could be stolen with one signature. But he needed more proof. He needed witnesses. He began talking quietly to neighbors, not openly, but in casual conversations, testing their reactions. Some were afraid, shaking their heads quickly, saying, "Don't ask questions, she'll find out." But others whispered more. One neighbor admitted, "She takes cash for trail passes, none of it goes to maintenance." Another whispered, "We saw her daughter throwing parties out there, and when people complained, she said it was her land." Slowly the man built a web of evidence, each piece stronger than the last. He copied maps, scanned the lease papers, recorded conversations, and all the while Karen strutted around the neighborhood with her same arrogance, fining people for weeds in their yard, yelling at children for chalk drawings on the sidewalk, acting as if she was untouchable. But the man smiled quietly now, because for the first time he had something real, something solid, a weapon she could not twist. Late into the night he walked to the edge of the trails, the moonlight shining on the path where so many neighbors hiked, the place Karen called her crown jewel. He crouched and touched the dirt, whispering, "This doesn't belong to you, and soon you'll learn that." The bulls snorted in the barn behind him, their heavy breath filling the silence, as if they too felt the storm that was building. Suspense wrapped around him like a cloak as he walked back to his house, his plan sharpening in his mind. Karen thought a fine would stop him, but instead she had given him the reason to dig, and now he had found the secret that could tear her empire apart. He whispered into the night, his voice calm and steady, "If she wants a war, then I'll end it on ground she thinks is hers." The man spent days gathering every piece of information he could find. Every late night he studied county maps, land records, and old lease agreements until his eyes burned from staring at the screen. The deeper he looked, the clearer the truth became. Those trails that Karen bragged about, the ones she called her crown jewel, were not hers at all. They were owned by an old timber company that had stopped cutting trees years ago. The company leased the land to the HOA for a small fee, a temporary agreement that was about to expire in just a few months. Karen had kept this quiet. She acted as if the trails were the neighborhood's forever. She charged neighbors cash donations to maintain them, but in reality the money went into her pocket. The man sat back in his chair with a slow smile, because he realized he had the chance to take everything from her without lifting a single weapon. Just one signature could break her empire. But he needed to move fast. If Karen learned the truth, she would fight to keep it. So he made calls quietly, his voice calm but steady as he reached out to the landowner, a man whose family had controlled the timber company for decades. The conversation was simple. The man asked if the trails were for sale, and the landowner chuckled, saying, "I've been waiting for someone to buy them. Your HOA never paid their lease on time. We'd be glad to hand it over if the price is right." The man's heart pounded. This was the opening he needed. He scheduled a private meeting, driving out of town to a small office where the deal could be made quietly. No neighbors, no gossip, no Karen. He walked in with his savings, money he had built carefully over the years. And he placed it on the table. The landowner shook his hand firmly. Congratulations, the trails are yours now. The papers slid across the desk. The man signed his name with a steady hand. And just like that, the land that Karen thought was hers now belonged to him. He held the deed in his hands, the weight of it heavy but powerful. As if justice itself had taken shape on paper. He drove home with the folder on the seat beside him, every mile feeling like victory, but he said nothing. He showed no sign. He parked his truck like always. He waved calmly to neighbors who peeked from their porches, and he walked into his house quietly, because silence was his weapon. Karen strutted through the neighborhood that week louder than ever, handing out petty fines, boasting in meetings about the community trails that she claimed she had saved for the people. Her daughter laughed beside her, mocking anyone who dared to question her mother. But the man stayed silent, watching, waiting, letting her arrogance rise higher so her fall would be even harder. Every night he looked at the deed, the official stamps, the signatures, and his anger softened into something colder and more dangerous, patience, because he knew the right moment to reveal the truth would come. And when it did, the entire neighborhood would see Karen for what she really was. He walked past the barn, the bulls shifting heavily inside, their breath misting in the air. They seemed restless, almost sensing the storm of revenge building around their master. He whispered to them softly, "Not yet, soon." Suspense grew like a storm cloud as he prepared quietly, his mind sharper than ever. Karen thought her fine would stop him. But instead it had given him the reason to dig, and that digging had uncovered the one weapon she could never fight. The truth written in black and white on the deed he now owned. And when he finally revealed it, the screams would not come from him, they would come from her. The day of the big HOA event arrived. Karen had been bragging about it for weeks, telling everyone that the annual community hike was proof of her leadership. She had sent flyers, posted announcements, and even gone door to door, her voice dripping with arrogance as she promised the neighbors a celebration on the trails that only she could provide. The man stood at his window watching as cars lined the street. Families walked toward the trail entrance with backpacks and water bottles, children skipping ahead excitedly. Karen stood at the front wearing a bright jacket, holding a microphone, her daughter beside her waving like they were celebrities. The man could hear her voice echoing even from his porch. "Welcome everyone. Today we celebrate our beautiful community trails, safe and open thanks to your HOA, thanks to me." The crowd clapped, some politely, some nervously. Because nobody dared to argue with her in public, she strutted proudly, her smile sharp as she added, "And to those who doubted me, let today prove I always protect this neighborhood." The man picked up the folder from his table, the deed resting inside, the papers cool under his fingers, his heart steady as stone. He walked slowly toward the crowd, his boots crunching on the gravel. People noticed him. Whispers spread instantly. "That's him, the one she fined. Why is he here? This won't end well." Karen spotted him approaching and her smile widened like a predator seeing prey. She spoke into the microphone, her voice dripping with mockery. "Oh, look who decided to join us, the hunter himself, here to cause more trouble no doubt. Maybe he wants to scare us with his rifles. But don't worry. This is community land, he has no power here." The crowd chuckled nervously. But the man did not stop. He walked straight to the front. His eyes locked on Karen, calm and cold. He pulled the folder from under his arm and held it high, his voice strong. "You're right about one thing, Karen. This land is no longer mine." He paused, the suspense making the crowd lean forward. "Because it belongs to me now, not the HOA, not you, me." He opened the folder and pulled out the deed, the official stamps and signatures shining in the sunlight. The crowd gasped. Whispers turned into shouts. People craned their necks to see. Karen's smile froze, her face pale, her voice stuttering. That's impossible. Those trails are HOA property. Everyone knows that." The man's voice cut her like a blade. "No, everyone believed your lies. You leased this land for years and pretended it was yours, but the lease expired, and I bought it. The county records prove it. I own every path, every tree, every inch you claimed as your empire." Neighbors gasped louder, some pulling out their phones to take pictures of the papers, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Karen snatched the microphone, her voice screeching, "Lies? He forged it. Don't listen to him. This is fake." But a neighbor shouted back, "Then show us your proof, Karen. Show us the HOA deed." Karen froze, her eyes darting, her hands trembling as she realized she had nothing. She had never had anything. Another neighbor shouted, We've been paying her for passes. She took our money for land she never owned. The crowd erupted, angry voices rising, years of silence breaking all at once. Karen screamed into the microphone. Quiet, I am your president. I decide what happens here. You will listen to me. But her voice cracked, the authority gone. People turned away from her and turned toward the man, their eyes full of respect and curiosity. The man held the deed high one last time and said firmly, "From this day forward these trails are private. You will not set foot on them without my permission. And as for you, Karen, your lies are finished." The crowd gasped again. Some clapped, some cheered quietly. Karen dropped the microphone, her face red with rage, her daughter shouting insults from the side, but nobody listened. Everyone was staring at the man with the deed, the one who had finally broken the Queen's crown in front of all her loyal subjects. Suspense hung thick in the air as Karen's scream echoed across the woods, a sound not of victory but of defeat, and for the first time in years, the neighborhood saw her powerless. The next morning the neighborhood woke to the sound of trucks rumbling down the road, heavy tires crushing the gravel as flatbeds arrived carrying lumber, steel, gates, and rolls of barbed wire. Workers in bright vests stepped out, their voices sharp as they began unloading equipment, hammers clanging, drills buzzing, and saws cutting through wood. The man stood at the edge of his driveway with the deed in his pocket, his eyes fixed on the trail entrance where Karen had strutted so proudly the day before. Today it would no longer be hers. Today it would be sealed. Neighbors peeked from their windows, whispering nervously as they saw posts being driven deep into the earth, tall fences rising one by one, a solid wall where once there had been open paths. Workers dug holes for concrete bases, the sound of shovels striking rock echoing through the trees, and with every slam of the hammer Karen's false empire cracked further. By noon a massive steel gate stood at the main entrance with a bold sign bolted onto it. Private property, no trespassing. The letters were big, black, and impossible to ignore. Below it another line was added. Violators will be prosecuted. The neighbors gasped when they saw it. Some shook their heads in shock. Others whispered that Karen would lose her mind, and they were right. Because within an hour Karen came storming down the street, her daughter at her side, her face red, her voice already raised. "What do you think you're doing? You can't block these trails. This is community land," she shrieked. But the workers ignored her, their drills buzzing as they bolted another section of the fence, sparks flying. In the daylight, the man stood calmly near the gate, his arms folded, his voice steady when he finally spoke. "This land is mine now. The county recognizes it. The deed proves it. You and your lies are finished, Karen." She stomped closer, waving her arms like a mad queen who had just lost her throne. "No, I forbid this. You can't just lock us out. People love these trails. The HOA won't allow it." But the neighbors were gathering now, slowly stepping out of their houses, drawn by the noise, by curiosity, by the thrill of finally seeing someone stand against her. And this time they weren't on her side. They muttered angrily, "She stole our money. She lied about owning it. She thought she was untouchable." Karen spun toward them desperately. "Don't believe him. He's tricking you. He forged papers." But the man pulled the deed from his jacket, unfolded it slowly, and held it up for everyone to see. "Official." He said simply, "Stamped, signed, and recorded with the county. You can check it yourself." The neighbors leaned closer, phones snapping pictures, eyes widening as they saw the proof. Karen's face twisted, her words stumbling. This isn't fair. You can't do this. Those trails belong to everyone." But her voice was drowned out by the sound of another post being slammed into the ground, the metallic clang echoing like a hammer on her crown. The workers rolled out the last section of fence, sealing off the trail completely. Karen rushed forward to grab the sign. But one of the workers stepped in front of her, his voice firm. "Touch this again and you'll be charged with trespassing." Her daughter screamed, "This is abuse. You can't treat us like criminals." But the crowd laughed bitterly. One neighbor shouted, "That's exactly what you treated us like for years. Fines for nothing, threats for no reason. Now it's your turn." Karen spun in a circle, her voice rising higher. "No, no, no. This isn't over. I will call the board. I will call the police. I will sue." But the man's calm voice cut through her shrieks, low and heavy. "Call whoever you want. The law is on my side. You lost Karen, and now everyone sees it." The neighbors nodded. Some even clapped quietly. Karen's daughter pulled her mother's arm, trying to drag her away. But Karen dug her heels into the dirt, still shouting threats. still trying to claw back power that had slipped through her fingers. But it was too late. The gate was locked, the fences sealed, the signs bolted, the trails. She had called hers now belonged to the man alone. The queen of the HOA was standing outside the walls like a beggar, screaming at a kingdom that no longer listened. The suspense tightened in the air as the crowd watched her crumble, her voice breaking into a hoarse cry. "You'll regret this, all of you, I'll make you regret this." But the man only turned his back and walked away, his boots steady, his shoulders straight, leaving her words to echo uselessly in the empty woods. The land was his. The truth was his, and Karen had finally been locked out of the empire she had built on lies. The gate stood tall at the trail entrance, its steel bars glinting in the sun, the bold black letters on the sign staring back at everyone who walked past. Private property, no trespassing. The neighborhood was quiet that evening. But it wasn't the quiet of fear, it was the quiet of change. People stood in small groups whispering, some shaking their heads, some smiling, all of them realizing that the balance of power had shifted. For years Karen had ruled them with her clipboard and threats, her endless fines and arrogant speeches. But now she stood outside the locked trails like a ghost, pacing back and forth with her daughter, her face pale, her voice hoarse from screaming all day. The workers had left, their job finished, and the fence now wrapped tightly around the woods like a wall that could not be broken. The man sat on his porch, his boots resting on the steps, his arms folded as he watched the street with calm eyes. He didn't need to shout or gloat. The deed spoke louder than any words. The neighbors passed by one, nodding to him, some stopping to say quietly, "Thank you," others giving small smiles of relief. Their fear had cracked. The spell Karen had cast on them was gone. She had been exposed, her empire shattered. Inside her own house she screamed at the board over the phone, demanding emergency meetings, threatening lawsuits, swearing she would take the land back. But nobody listened the same way anymore. The board members had already seen the proof. They had already heard the crowd turn against her. Her voice was no longer power, it was only noise. The man walked the property line the next morning, the air fresh and still, the birds singing again in the woods behind the fences, the ground still scarred from where Karen's fake empire had trampled it. But now it was his, safe and silent. He paused by the locked gate, running his hand across the cold steel, whispering softly, "You're mine now, and no one will steal you again." Behind him a few neighbors approached, people who once stayed silent in fear, now speaking with gratitude. "She can't hurt us anymore," one said. "You showed us she was just smoke and mirrors," another added. "We were scared for too long. But you stood up." The man nodded quietly, his eyes never leaving the woods. He didn't need thanks. He only wanted peace. But deep inside he knew Karen was not finished. Her pride was too strong, her hate too deep, and he remembered the way she had screamed, her voice full of venom. "You'll regret this. I'll make you regret this." Those words hung in his mind like a shadow, a reminder that her fall was not the end but the beginning of something darker. But for now, the neighborhood had tasted freedom. The silence felt like victory. The children laughed in their yards again without Karen barking rules at them. Neighbors stopped living under constant threat, and the man's land was secure. The trails she claimed as her kingdom were locked, the gate standing tall as a monument to her defeat. That night he sat on his porch under the stars, the cool wind brushing across his face, his bulls moving quietly in the barn, their heavy snorts breaking the silence every so often, and he thought about how a single fine had started everything, how Karen thought she could break him with her arrogance. But instead she had awakened something stronger. He leaned back, his voice low but steady. "They thought a fine would stop me, instead I stopped them." His words faded into the night, the stars watching silently as the neighborhood rested for the first time in years. But far down the street, through the windows of her house, the sound of Karen's angry shouting could still be heard, and the man knew her rage had only begun. The suspense lingered like a storm waiting at the horizon, promising that the battle with Karen was over for now. But the war was far from finished.